Most famous people are just a little crazy. It turns out that when we as humans get our hands on a little bit too much money or get a little too popular, we tend to commit crimes, or at the very least, do some weird shit. And there's one man who has done more weird shit than almost any other famous person that you can name right now. A man that just so happens to also be one of the most critically decorated rappers of our generation and possibly of all time. A man who has been the center of attention in the music industry for years, and for most of my adult life, not for any good reasons. Giving unsolicited medical advice to fans, taking unfavorable political stances, or hateful comments towards various groups of people, just to name a few of those reasons. But against all odds, his albums stay highly rated on music reviewing sites, and even his newest songs remain in the charts. Almost unanimously, audiences have agreed to separate the art from the artist. And the craziest part is, despite not having said his name yet and not having included his name in the title at all, almost everyone watching knows exactly who I'm talking about. The phrase separate the art from the artist has been associated with one person above anyone else, and that person's name, at least used to be, Kanye West. But I don't think it's quite so simple. I don't think Kanye West the person and Kanye West's music are completely independent things, and I think looking at only one of them at a time is doing both sides of the argument a disservice. If you ignore the music, you don't get the full picture of his musical influence, and if you ignore his actions outside of his music, it makes Kanye look a lot more innocent than he is. So what I'm going to do is re-listen to Kanye West's entire discography while detailing the entire timeline of Kanye West's career. Kanye West's first studio album was The College Dropout, released in 2004. And this album, like with a lot of artists, is the most important to Kanye's story. Not only is it his highest selling and most critically acclaimed album, but it also shows his intentions and motivations behind making music. But the story of The College Dropout starts well before 2004. Jeopardy, 60 Minutes, Saturday Night Live. Those are three of the biggest and only cable television shows that I can name. More specifically, they are public broadcasting cable shows. But between the early 70s and late 2000s, there was another type of cable show, public access television, cable shows that are free for the public and aired by local cable operators. In 1998, in Chicago, there was a public access television show named Channel Zero, where up-and-coming interviewer named Cootie Simmons, just known as Cootie, was getting up close and personal with the artists leading the underground Chicago rap scene. Now, you might think I'm going to say that this is where Cootie met up-and-coming rapper Kanye West. And while that is technically kind of true, it's not the whole story. At the time, Kanye was garnering a name for himself as a local producer, making ends meet by making beats for other rappers. And while most of the Chicago rap scene co-signed him, he wasn't happy with his current path. When Cootie met Kanye in 1998, Kanye was already talking about becoming a rapper and starting his own solo career. And when I say talking about it, I don't just mean mentioning it in passing. He was ranting about it in the same passionate and dramatic way that he would become famous for years later. Grand ideas and very opinionated dialogue. But this is one of the more brutal things about the rap game back then. The thing holding him back was that he was too good at what he was already doing. It had been a pretty long time since anyone had seen such a talented producer from Chicago, and he was making beats for a lot of local rappers. Why would you, as someone directly benefiting from his talent, sign off on him starting his own solo career competing against you? And he was treated this way outside of Chicago as well. He moved to New York in 2001 to try to secure a record deal. At the time, Rockefeller Records was where Kanye wanted to be, and moving next to the label's headquarters would definitely aid in his goal of getting signed. But as crazy as this is, he would end up producing for Jay-Z and other artists at Rockefeller Records instead. That all being said, everyone who has shown Kanye's music personally had nothing but positive things to say. Mos Def and Talib Kweli loved his style and pushed to get him signed to their record label, Rawkus Records. And Dame Dash from Rockefeller Records was quick to admit that Kanye was talented, but Rawkus Records turned Kanye down entirely, and Rockefeller kept him at arm's distance as a producer. It just came down to the fact that the suits at the upper ends of these labels didn't see Kanye as anything but a producer for their other artists. So over the course of these 2 years, Kanye sort of got a chip on his shoulder. Everywhere he went, he was pigeonholed into being a producer, and held back from starting his rap career despite clearly being talented. Even once he finally got signed to Rockefeller outlet in 2002, he couldn't shake the title of rapper-producer, which outwardly bothered him.
Best rapper producer
That
in the fucking
don't
game.
even mean nothing to be like a best rapper producer.
No, it means a lot.
It don't, because them niggas is weak.
I keep saying best rapper producer, he mad.
Man, that's like saying best kid rapper or best or the best female MC. I love doing beats. I ain't front on the beats, but that's like an internship for me. I ain't gonna know what to do. I'm a rapper. You know what I'm saying?
And even though he was satisfied getting signed to the label that he aimed at, the struggle was not over yet. Throughout the 2 years that he was trying to get signed, Kanye was already working on the songs that would end up becoming the College Dropout. So as soon as he got signed, he was ready to start his final recordings and his album rollout to the public. But an almost fatal car accident left him hospitalized with a barely functioning jaw. Obviously, a pretty tough injury for someone trying to use their voice for a living. The thing is, in 2004, Kanye West really did not care about anything else other than becoming a rapper. Famously, Through the Wire was recorded basically immediately after the injury, and he talks about it on the song. He was recording at private studios and other rappers' studios because Rockefeller refused to open up his recording budget after the accident. It wasn't until Coodie and Kanye put together the music video for Through the Wire that they finally gave Kanye a release date for the album. This man could not be stopped from getting his album out. The College Dropout was an insane success, and in no small part because of the massive struggle it took for it to get out. And that's the kind of context that I feel is necessary when examining Kanye West's full story. This album bleeds with the hunger that he had, and a lot of what he was put through between 2001 and 2004 affects his later work as well. The main thing that I noticed re-listening to The College Dropout is that this album is much more focused on being unique and outwardly creative than you would expect it to be. This man was determined to be a rapper, and we know that thanks to Coodie's filming work. We watched him try to get in with a crowd that was, especially at the time, serious, cold, and valued overcoming struggle and having a legacy. But this album sounds nothing like the other rap albums coming out at the time. 2001 to 2004 was still what is referred to as the bling era of rap, known for having lyrics about owning expensive things and living lavishly. And that's coming off the back of the gangsta era, where most lyrics were about gang culture or life struggles. By complete contrast, The College Dropout has a specific and niche narrative, education, and Kanye uses that narrative as an allegory for his upbringing and thoughts about life, doing so over soul and R&B inspired beats and gospel themes. Kanye does spend time talking about social issues and different aspects of culture that he's experienced, which other rappers were doing at the time, but he left a lot of room for noticeably unique and creative elements. For example, the skits and interludes throughout the album that stick to the narrative but have an added stylistic twist, like the spoken word intro featuring DeRay Davis, or, most surprisingly for us now, the progressive and feminist subject matter on The New Workout Plan, which is mostly about beauty standards and societal pressures on women. Not necessarily something that the hard and machismo rappers leading the rap industry in 2004 would do. And knowing how he came to release this first album, there could be a few reasons for this disconnect. First of all, we know that Kanye is, just as he would say, not as street as other rappers, so he was most likely just playing to his strengths. But secondly, we saw that Kanye was incredibly stubborn about his own creative vision at the time. He would not take no for an answer, and he would take every opportunity to show people his tracks in a borderline nerdy and socially unacceptable way. And when he did, he would tell these established industry leaders if he didn't like their ideas to their faces. Even though he desperately wanted to fit in with the rap crowd, he wanted the album to sound his way, even if it didn't sound like anything else coming out at the time. It's hard to say this knowing where this story is going, but Kanye West was a revolutionary rapper, especially in the early 2000s. But the College Dropout era would not last forever. This is where things get a little tougher. The only reason that I was able to get so many clear details about this period of Kanye West's life was because of Coodie Simmons and his documentary titled Genius. But after this album released, the two mostly lost contact, which means, for all intents and purposes, we also lost contact with Kanye, which, importantly, is how he wanted things to be. He told Coodie that he was playing a character, only letting the media see the things about him that he wanted them to see, because now they wanted to see who he was. Right after the 2005 Grammy Awards, where Kanye won Best Rap Album of the Year and delivered his famous speech that included his "I guess we'll never know" comment, he immediately started work on his next album. And unlike the 5 years during the making of The College Dropout, we know very little about the studio environment or how Kanye was feeling during the making of Late Registration. All we have to go off of is what the media was given at the time. All we have to go off of is Kanye West, the character. He apparently invested about $1 million in US dollars up front on features, producers, instruments, and samples. Shortly after the recording process started, he also founded his own music label named Good Music. Over the course of the next year, Kanye invested another $1 million and all of his time into working on Late Registration. This time around, he worked with full string orchestras, numerous other artists, and many esteemed producers to finish the album. Years after the album's release, Kanye recounted that about 75% of the way through making the album, he worked with decorated pop producer John Bryan to fully rework it, as he wasn't really happy with the way the album was turning out. But it all worked out in the end, because upon release, Late Registration was incredibly successful. So much so that critics at the time said that Late Registration saved what was an otherwise mundane year of music. And now that the album was done, Kanye West, the self-proclaimed character, could regain the attention of the world. One of the most devastating hurricanes of all time hit the US in August of 2005, 8 days before the album's release. So, in September of 2005, Kanye was scheduled to speak and perform at a Hurricane Katrina benefit concert. But it was at this event that Kanye would get into his first of many major controversies with the media. Instead of saying his scripted speech, Kanye started a heartfelt rant about the government's handling of the situation, and how there was a clear inequality between the government's treatment towards victims of the hurricane who are white versus victims of the hurricane who are black. It was in this rant that he delivered his famous diss towards former US President George W. Bush, saying that he, quote, doesn't care about black people. Here is where I should probably mention that I don't plan to give opinions about all of the topics that Kanye has covered. Frankly, I'm just another white boy, but also, it doesn't really matter for the point of this video. That being said, it is surprising to see something as empathetic and humanitarian as this being depicted as controversy from the media, especially considering some of his later rants on air. Yes, he did go off script, and he might have said some things that were pretty crass, but he's acting in a lot of other people's best interests. Similarly, in a 2005 MTV interview, Kanye spoke out against homophobia in rap music, going into decent detail about his feelings as well. But that was only the beginning of Kanye speaking his mind in public settings. The 2006 MTV Europe Music Awards was the next award show that Kanye was nominated at and was supposed to show up to. And predictably, he expected the music video for Touch the Sky to win Best Music Video. And when he didn't, he ran up on stage and made a case as to why he should have won the award. And this was obviously a pretty big deal. It's not really the most respectful thing to the people who actually won the award, nor is it the most respectful thing to the people who chose the winner of the award. But he did actually apologize shortly after the incident, and he also appeared in a Saturday Night Live sketch that spoofed the entire thing. So those events paint a somewhat less clear but still accurate picture of who Kanye West was at the time, or at least what he was presenting to the public. But how does that compare to the music that he was making at the time? Late Registration is very similar to the College Dropout, and that is intentional. They are connected through the college theme and part of a series together. But this album is much more focused on storytelling and giving perspectives on certain aspects of life that are relatable for everyone. You may notice that sounds a lot like conscious hip-hop, and I would agree. I think this album and the College Dropout fall pretty neatly into the conscious hip-hop subgenre, which is not the first genre that I think most people associate with Kanye West. The sentiment of Late Registration and Kanye's actions in 2005 also seem to align pretty well, unlike the College Dropout, which seemed almost paradoxical or contradictory in the way we saw Kanye act versus the way the album sounded. Instead of personal stories about his come-up and his hardships, Kanye tells other people's stories and talks about their hardships. And like we saw at the Hurricane Katrina benefit concert or the MTV interview that we looked at, Kanye himself also seems to be prioritizing the majority's issues and speaking for people who don't otherwise have a platform, which also makes Late Registration a very unique album cycle for this story. At no other point in Kanye's career was he as progressive-minded or conscious as he was at this point. It's impossible to say what exactly Kanye was thinking at the time, whether he was pretending to care about these issues to look better, if he was playing up how much he cared, or if he truly was a completely different person. Success treats everyone differently, so I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if the latter of those options was the case, especially if that success comes with sacrifice. By September of 2007, Kanye was ready to release his third studio album, Graduation, which was intended to be the third album in a 4-album series about college. Should be a super high point in his life, right? I mean, at this time, he was already 2 for 2 on albums that changed the rap scene entirely. But in November of 2007, a month after Graduation's release, Donda West, Kanye's mother, suddenly passed away from coronary artery disease, a fatal heart condition. And I haven't mentioned Donda West up until this point in the video because I get the feeling that most people already know at least some something about Donda West and how important she was in Kanye's life. And I am trying to tell a unique perspective on this story, but it cannot be understated just how important Donda was, not just to Kanye, but to so many others as well. She was Kanye's full-time manager post the College Dropout, and she also started a charity foundation to help underprivileged students get music education. The same documentary that showed the earliest days of Kanye's come-up also gave a thorough look into how pivotal Donda was to Kanye's success. Not only was she a single mother trying to support her incredibly wide-eyed son, but Kanye also used the time spent with his mother to release some of the tension that the rest of his life seemed to give him. And even once Kanye started saying these incredibly outspoken, controversial things, she publicly supported him. So I'm taking this second to emphasize just how important this death is in Kanye's life. And this came at a horrible time because Graduation turned out to be another massive success. The sound of the album was even more big and anthemic, and the lyrics were a departure from the social themes and broader issues and talked about more personal and introspective ideas. But the album itself is second to what it represented in the rap industry. This album was Kanye's explosive entrance into the mainstream, hitting Billboard #1 on the first day and selling 1 million copies within a week. But beyond commercial performance, the release of Graduation is known to have marked a turning point in mainstream hip-hop. 50 Cent, the famous rapper who was still leading the gangsta rap wave, and Kanye, who was still known to be much less street and much more nerdy, engaged in a friendly rivalry in preparation for their upcoming album releases, which were planned to happen on very similar days. When Graduation far surpassed 50 Cent's new record in sales, most saw it as the end of mainstream gangsta rap and an opportunity for rappers like Kanye to strive in the mainstream. We just have to hope that this genre-defining win doesn't go to Kanye's head. The 12 months after this were quiet for Kanye West, to the point where Kanye shelved the final album that was supposed to be in the College series titled Good Ass Job. It wasn't until the fall of 2008 that a new Kanye album was ready to be released. 808s and Heartbreak was made in 3 weeks, recorded in Honolulu, Hawaii, and Burbank, California. And while we know very little about the 12 months in between Graduation and 808s and Heartbreak, it's easy to assume that those months were pretty challenging for Kanye. What we do know is that 2008 was the year that he went on his Glow in the Dark tour. On that tour, he dedicated many songs to his mother and performed a few original songs that he wrote for her as well. We also know that somewhere within those 12 months, he separated with his then fiancée, Alexis Pfeiffer. By contrast, the album that he released on the other end of 2008 was almost instantly labeled as his best album yet by critics and fans. The album is most often described as Kanye's most avant-garde project, with a very unique sound that once again changed the landscape of hip-hop forever. For example, and this seems pretty normal to us now, but back then, the heavy use of autotune on tracks like Heartless hadn't really been seen before. And lyrics-wise, it's mostly a breakup album, surprisingly. We've dropped the conscious and empathetic subject matters for an inward-looking, deeply depressing list of subjects, all of which relate to some sort of hardship in Kanye's life that he's faced. Most of the songs are about love, sadness, and this self-absorbed pity that he was feeling. It's clear that this album is infinitely different than his first 3 projects. The most interesting thing to me is that despite all of this hardship that Kanye went through over the last 12 months, he blamed his mother's death, his breakup, and his feelings of loneliness on his newfound fame and attention, not to poor luck or bad circumstances. Because he had become obsessed with attention and analyzing his new place in life, his music becomes much more self-absorbed, for better or for worse. On Welcome to Heartbreak, Kanye expresses his concerns about missing out on major life events that most people experience because of his obsession with popularity. Amazing is self-absorbed, to say the least, and in no amount sarcastic, I'm sure. Some of the middle tracks on the album, like RoboCop or Paranoid, show Kanye aggressively frustrated at his ex-partner and trying to deal with that. And the events that come right before and right after the release of 808s and Heartbreak only made this self-absorbed spiral worse. In September of 2009, Kanye attended the 2009 MTV Music Video Awards, at which Kanye had 4 nominations. And at that event, Kanye would get into what is possibly his most famous controversy. Taylor Swift was on the stage accepting her award for Best Female Music Video and delivering her speech. But for discernibly no reason at all whatsoever, Kanye West appears on stage, takes the mic from Taylor, and interrupts her to say, and I quote, "Yo Taylor, I'm really happy for you, I'ma let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time." The music video in question was Single Ladies Put a Ring on It. When the crowd started booing him, he took the opportunity to hand the mic back to Taylor, literally shrug it off, and walk off the stage. He was then removed from the event, and the president called him a jackass a few days later. Oh, and by the way, Beyonce was going to win Best Video anyway, and when she did, she let Taylor Swift come back on stage to finish her speech. This is not a good habit to have. Like I said when this happened in 2007, it's pretty disrespectful towards the person who actually won the award, Taylor Swift. And it's also a little disrespectful towards MTV, who chose the award winners. And it's awkward as fuck for Beyonce. He did apologize a day later on the Jay Leno show, but he did make sure to do a round of interviews where he doubled down on his statements. Also, Taylor Swift will become a recurring character in Kanye's Controversies, so keep this in mind. But why was he doing all of this? These attention-seeking, clearly socially unacceptable actions seemingly came out of nowhere. But knowing what we know now, it could have been the tragedy and heartbreak he faced. It could have also been his newfound fame and attention and the pressure that put on him. Or it could have been just for publicity and to further his career. I mean, really only time will tell. After that nightmare disaster, Kanye went back to mostly focusing on making music. For the next album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Kanye worked in his home studio in Honolulu, Hawaii, and shipped the artists and producers that he wanted to work with out to him. By this point, Kanye not only had something to prove, needing to come back from his previous controversy, but he also had the money, fame, and power in the rap industry to make it happen in whatever esoteric and bizarre way he found fitting. And all of that weird but hard work did end up paying off. Unlike 808s and its minimalist sound, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy went maximalist, with big sounds, dramatic themes, and an excess of emotions. In the intro track, Dark Fantasy, with its angelic refrain, in Power, with its repetitive reverb-soaked sample, or most famously, Runaway, with its dramatic instrumental switch in the beginning and powerful bass line. All examples of the maximalist aesthetic on full display. But where this album applies to our narrative is in the emotional and poignant lyrics that Kanye raps. On this project, Kanye made a point to talk about all of the taboo things that people had been associating with him over the past few years. He almost leans in to being the borderline narcissist that a lot of people had labeled Kanye as, and does so in a way that suggests he's still above all the gossip. For example, on Power, where he compares himself to a superhero, but ironically is sampling King Crimson's 21st Century Schizoid Man. He also talks openly about drug and alcohol abuse, his sex and porn addiction, anxiety, greed, and a lot of other things associated with celebrity culture. On 808s and Heartbreak, we saw him start to reflect on his fame, and in interviews at the time, he said it felt lonely at the top. And by 2010, with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, it starts to seem that while still creatively inspired, Kanye is starting to feel the emotional strain of that isolation. When shown the things that can be done with infinite money and fame, some people do weird things with it. And Kanye, even after showing promise as this humanitarian culture leader, is falling into some of those traps. But the key detail with this era is that I think Kanye is channeling these inherently unrelatable and sort of depraved thoughts into a unique and thought-provoking package. The songs themselves stand enough on their own for people to fill in their own experiences and form a unique emotional connection. I think this album, and 808s and Heartbreak, would have been received a lot worse if Kanye was just laying his bizarre ideas out into the music with no nuance at all. Over the next few years, Kanye made a lot of moves on the business side of things. His record label, Good Music, would expand to house a lot more artists, and he would release the collaboration album with Jay-Z, titled Watch the Throne, under Good Music as well. Throughout the last decade, Kanye had also been working on fashion brands and clothing lines. We can see that Kanye is continuing to deviate towards being a businessman and a celebrity over the creative visionary that he once saw himself as and became famous for. It wasn't until 2013, 3 years after the release of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, that Kanye was gearing up to release another album. And that next album, Yeezus, did very well once again. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard Top 100 and was met with raving reviews from critics. The public perception of the album was a little bit more mixed though. The abrasive sound and self-important lyrics just came across a lot less relatable than some of his previous projects, and that turned a lot of audiences off from the album. For example, the first song on the album, On Sight, sounds cold and robotic. It is nothing like any other rap music that was being made at the time. Or on a song like I Am a God, the chorus is literally just Kanye saying that he is a god, which is obviously kind of jarring. We can still see signs of Kanye's early ideas and motivations, but now they're twisted to serve a more narcissistic agenda, and that's just me calling a spade a spade. Like on Black Skinhead, where the rebellious lyrics about race and religion seem to be forward-thinking and progressive, but it ends up meandering into a much more more convoluted place. Or how Kanye said the album was inspired by 1980s Chicago house music because he wanted it to have a hometown influence, but buried that sound underneath these bizarre lyrics. There are some songs that seem to just be Kanye being Kanye, with kind of jarring lyrics and high-quality production. And then there are other songs where all you can think about afterwards are his weird comments about Parkinson's disease, or his very detailed description about him courting an Asian woman. And keep in mind, this is around the time that Kanye started to post weird things on Twitter and act unpredictably in interviews. Most famously from this era was the 2013 Twitter rant where he slammed Jimmy Kimmel, who spoofed a Radio 1 interview that he did where he talked about the more commercial side of being a celebrity and the consequences of rap being more mainstream. Listen, I have to be fair in this video. I said I wanted to tell this story in a way that no one else had and give context to Kanye's actions and his music that isn't normally there. Earlier, we saw added context make Kanye look a little better than I think most people would have assumed. But here is where I have to say that added context makes him and his music look a little bit worse than I think most people remember. Songs like I'm In It or Guilt Trip show Kanye starting to make less and less sense. And what sense he does make sounds concerning, to say the least. And this is only 2013. Critics tend to look back on Yeezus over a decade later fondly, and the same goes for general audiences. It just so happened that this album grew on everybody. But I think it's important to keep in mind that those opinions come years and years separated from the events that surrounded this album's release. Him saying in interviews, I am a god, and speaking in a very self-important way, and then also having the same narrative in his music and repeating it throughout his songs makes the music less profound and more off-putting, if you ask me. And unlike his last two projects, where he talked about inherently taboo subjects by telling stories and adding nuance, Yeezus leaves no room for interpretation and is a lot less subtle. Moving on though, the Yeezus tour was Kanye's first solo tour since 2007, and he took the opportunity to try and shock audiences, which he definitely did. Images and videos from this tour are bizarre. A lot of naked people. Kanye placed a huge emphasis on imagery for this tour and stayed disturbingly dedicated to his original creative vision for the album. Is anyone reviewing his decisions before he locks them in? I feel like you have to choose one. Either be the artist that has naked people with you on stage, or demand people listen to your political and social takes. You can't have it both ways. But it's time to do a controversy check-in. Between 2013 and 2016, shit got a little weird. We already talked about the Radio 1 interview and the Jimmy Kimmel feud, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. First of all, in May of 2014, Kanye got married to Kim Kardashian, which people saw as a pretty bizarre couple considering she was a reality TV star and he was a controversial yet still respected rapper. Not really that big of a deal, but the media at the time made it seem pretty hot and spicy. But a little before that, in 2013, he got in pretty hot water for accepting a $3 million payout for performing at Kazakhstan President Nursultan Nazarbayev's grandson's wedding. The president of Kazakhstan was receiving global backlash at the time for major human rights violations, so people weren't really too happy with Kanye supporting the family, which is fair, and especially bizarre considering Kanye's previous moral alignments. And then at the 2015 Grammy Awards, because that's where everything seems to go wrong for Kanye, he once again stormed the stage to defend Beyonce. But actually, no, he didn't. It was just a joke. Wait. Actually, no, it wasn't a joke. Kanye said after the event that when Beck won Best Album of the Year, he was going to run up on stage and say his piece defending Beyonce, but he decided not to in the moment. He had intentions to repeat the 2008 incident. He later did apologize to Beck. And around the same time, Kanye announced the release of his new clothing line, Yeezy, and he joined as a co-founder of the brand new music streaming platform named Tidal. But even normal-looking business ventures like these weren't safe from controversy. Kanye got in some pretty serious trouble when he straight up lied to get more users on Tidal. He said that his next album, The Life of Pablo, would be Tidal exclusive, but it just wasn't. And afterwards, he admitted to lying in order to get more people on the failing platform. These missteps led audiences at the Glastonbury Music Festival and the 2015 Pan American Games to write petitions trying to stop him from appearing, which had 135,000 and 50,000 supporters, respectively. The masses did not favor Kanye West as someone to platform anymore. Whether that's because of his random controversial Twitter statements or the compounding effect of all of these controversies, it's impossible to say, but it's probably both. And right before before you think we can move on, he defended Bill Cosby 2 days before the release of Life of Pablo. There was debate at the time about whether or not it was a publicity stunt, but a lot of people took it seriously considering his previous outlandish statements. But even if he did do this to garner hype for the Life of Pablo, why? These 3 years probably affected Kanye's reputation the most so far. Comparing his actions from 2004 to 2007 to 2016 is like looking at two different people. Between getting deeper into some more experimental business ventures, releasing much more avant-garde music, and acting in a complete loose cannon way, Kanye no longer appears relatable, self-aware, or selfless. He's much more of a classic celebrity, removed from reality and almost resembling a statue of himself. Obsessed with saying the most outlandish things possible just to get attention, and then convincing people he's worth listening to. But by December of 2015, Kanye had become a father of 2 children with Kim Kardashian. And Cudi, the man who recorded Kanye's early career, attributed that as to the reason why this happened, but the two reconnected in late 2015, shortly after the birth of his kids. And during this period of clarity is when Cudi took the famous video of the reveal event for the Life of Pablo and the new Yeezy clothing line. And after that teaser show, a few name changes, and a very brief exclusive release on Tidal, the Life of Pablo did eventually release and debut at #1 on Billboard again. This album, unlike Yeezus, did very well in the court of public opinion, as it's much more friendly and consumable than some of his previous work. The subject matter of the album was mostly Kanye's interpretation of the gospel, family issues that he's had, and, once again, his celebrity lifestyle. The Life of Pablo also featured some of the biggest pop artists of the time and has much more pop-focused production. This appeared to be a commercial return to form for West. The problem is, his defense of Bill Cosby, his performance in Kazakhstan, his disrespect towards Beck, or any of this other stuff, it still kind of makes me feel uneasy. At the very least, it feels wrong to sit here and watch and listen to this person like a zoo animal, knowing everything that's happened. And it's easy to assume that's kind of how Kanye felt, like a massive human spectacle. Because, unfortunately, those feelings spilled into the music, and it's pretty clear. Kanye himself made it very hard not to think of his ideas or his actions while listening to this album. For example, on Saint Pablo, Kanye takes time to talk about his controversial Twitter history and talks about whether or not people think he's losing his mind. Knowing that at the time he was very much testing the limits of his celebrity status, it makes these weird lines stand out a lot more. And things would really only get worse in the coming months. In June of 2016, Kanye would find himself in another controversy with other celebrities. The song Famous, off the Life of Pablo, featuring Rihanna, had its music video released that summer, and in it, there were wax depictions of multiple famous people, and they were all naked in a bed together. Among those wax figures, there were depictions of George W. Bush, Donald Trump, Caitlyn Jenner, Chris Brown, and Taylor Swift. This was obviously not received very well by the media, and it was really only made worse because there was an ongoing debate about whether or not Taylor Swift had signed off on a specific line from the song that referenced her. Kanye said that she agreed to have it in the song, and Kim Kardashian released a video of Taylor Swift appearing to agree to it, but later context for that video would reveal that Taylor Swift did not in fact know about the line in question. Immediately off the back of the Life of Pablo, this was not the kind of controversy that Kanye needed, especially considering he was gearing up for his biggest tour yet. The Saint Pablo tour was planned to start in August of 2016 and end in December of 2016, and it was supposed to be Kanye's most impressive tour yet. First of all was the first of its kind floating stage that had lights on the sides and bottom that had programming based on the show. Secondly, the hype that this tour had was monstrous. The Yeezus tour was a similarly massive spectacle, but with the added showmanship this time, people everywhere were waiting with bated breath to see what kind of creative shows Kanye would put on. And last but not least, this tour was supposed to run for 5 whole months, which, considering all the prep and technology required for these shows, is pretty impressive. There was a decent chance, even if you didn't live anywhere near a major city, that you would be able to see Kanye West in his supposed prime. But none of this panned out correctly, as you might expect. On October 2nd of 2016, Kanye had to cut a show short due to what he told the audience was a family emergency. His wife, Kim K, was being held at gunpoint in Paris, and he rushed over there to make sure everything was okay and deal with the aftermath. This, while tragic, is the definition of shit happens. This incident would have never been an issue. It was how Kanye dealt with this obstacle and how the rest of the tour went that ended up being kind of problematic. His returning show was 5 days later in his hometown of Chicago. You would expect, with his passionate loyalty to his hometown, that he would make the show an electric one and at least give the audience a unique experience. But the recounting of that show is that he barely barely spoke to the audience at all. And after it started nearly an hour late, he cut it off early as well. And then, by late November, Kanye started to add weird political intermissions into the shows, and eventually, this started to take over the tour. This came to a point in the California leg of the tour, where in one show, he said that if he had voted, he would have voted for Trump, which led the audience to throw items up at him on his stage. He ranted for almost the entire runtime about politics, social media, other artists, and various bizarre issues before ending the show early. And after those two, all future dates were canceled because of Kanye's declining mental state. The way this tour ended left audiences in outrage, but also in shock. Why is this artist, who was once a mouthpiece for culture and inspired artists everywhere, suddenly making no sense? And making no sense in a way that almost no one could diagnose. Even Snoop Dogg, a man who is familiar with drugs, literally questioned what this man was on. But everything would start to make sense in the coming days. The public would find out on November 21st that Kanye was admitted to UCLA Medical Center because of temporary psychosis due to extreme sleep deprivation and dehydration. It was while there that Kanye was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that diagnosis explained a lot for a lot of people. His inconsistent and unpredictable nature over the past few years was probably because the man was genuinely in the dark as to how his brain worked. Living with any mental disorder is hard, even if you shit out money and wipe your ass with bank checks. Because we as humans are good at recognizing patterns, and we really like to simplify things for ourselves, many different audiences drew conclusions about Kanye based on these St. Pablo tour incidents and the following mental diagnosis. On one side, there were the people saying that Kanye West is sick, and that nothing he says can be believed or listened to, writing him off as a clinically crazy person. Whether this manifests in sympathy or anger depends on the person and their opinions about the things that he has done. But either way, the sentiment ends up the same. Kanye is sick, please ignore him. And on the other side, there were the people saying not to trust the recounting of these events entirely, and he might not be fully mentally ill. Basically, simplifying all of these events into one mental break/episode, therefore concluding that we don't have to ignore all the things he said, and that he might in fact be a social visionary. Whether you were on either of those sides back then, or you look back and see one of those sides as correct now, doesn't really matter though. At the end of the day, it was just everyone trying to grapple with the idea that, wait, maybe none of this was for attention. Maybe all of this stuff wasn't just a publicity stunt, which is a profound thought because it adds a scary amount of context to some of his more unhinged music, the music previously thought to just be the result of nerdy, creative obsession. It's likely that a lot of those bizarre lyrics that we all just shrugged off were actually showing how this person thinks. At the time, I think most people predicted this to be the end of Kanye West's career. I mean, most famous people who crash down this hard don't make a substantial comeback. Now, looking back, that obviously didn't happen, but I think it's important to note that this is going to be a narrative shift. From the life of Pablo onward, audiences receive Kanye's music with a certain amount of hesitancy. After these St. Pablo tour incidents, Kanye went dark for an entire year. No music, no announcements, no tweets, nothing, which was unusual for the celebrity who, at this point, had garnered a reputation for essentially being the old, senile grandpa who has no filter on Twitter. It wasn't until May of 2017 that word got out that Kanye was recording new music. This time, he leaked that he was recording in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the middle of nowhere, with many different producers and artists shipped out there. Along with the announcement of a new Kanye West album, the public also got word of a new collaboration album between Kanye and Kid Cudi. And there was also the announcement of a life coaching book that was being written by Kanye as well. I'll just go ahead and spoil right now, that book never got released. More of it ended up on Twitter than on a page, as unfortunate as that is. But Ye and Kids See Ghosts were both released in 2018. Kids See Ghosts saw massive critical and wider audience acclaim. Ye, on the other hand, is the first album Kanye has released up until this point that wasn't immediately met with raving reviews. But we'll talk about that in just a second. For now, we need to talk about the events that happened around this album's release. In 2018, Kanye spent some time working on his label Good Music again. This time he released albums for Nas, Teyana Taylor, and Pusha T. Pusha T's album, Daytona, was released in May of 2018, but attracted some controversy because of the album cover, which was a real photo of Whitney Houston's bathroom that Kanye allegedly paid $85,000 to license. As you can see, the photo is not necessarily flattering. Also in 2018, Kanye started an architecture firm called Yeezy Home, whose first project was a fully concrete housing concept. This never took off. 2018 was also the year that Kanye started to talk about the political activities of the country. On the single Ye vs. the People, the rapper T.I. and Kanye rap about Kanye's support for Donald Trump and the conservative side of the media. A song that is titled and inspired by the FX crime series American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson. This means that Kanye officially compared himself to the famous criminal who abused the justice system to literally get away with murder, O.J. Simpson. Knowing what we know about the last few years of Kanye's life, I gotta say, I was a little nervous re-listening to this album. And I can't necessarily say that my anxieties weren't proven rational. The album is mostly about Kanye's mental state, his own perspective on his psyche, and his thoughts about various aspects of life and things he's experienced in a more detailed way than ever before. I Thought About Killing You is a song about Kanye's suicidal ideation and dealing with that emotion. He would later confirm this in a New York Times interview conducted at his place in Wyoming, saying that he always weighed suicide as an option. On No Mistakes, Kanye swaps back and forth between addressing disses from Canadian pedophile Drake and addressing the struggles of the last 12 months. But things just aren't quite what they seem on the surface. Ye suffers from a similar issue to Life of Pablo, with random self-indulgent lyrics scattered throughout the project. Other moments are made uncomfortable because of needless connections to celebrity culture, like on All Mine, where the entire second verse is Kanye name-dropping different celebrities just to serve the narrative of the song. And other songs are ruined once you learn the context of Kanye's actions. The sappy and emotional song Violent Crimes that closed out the album was revealed to not even have been written by Kanye at all. He only slightly modified 2 of the lyrics on the track. Like I said earlier, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and 808s and Heartbreak managed to cover these illicit subjects, but did so with nuance and left room to separate the art from the artist. But with these last 3, Yeezus, The Life of Pablo, and Ye, Kanye leaves constant reminders as to how he was acting and his own ideas in the music, despite what a lot of people want to believe. Kanye's mental state is still genuinely deteriorating, instead of him playing a character as he once would have said. But that's still not the whole story of Ye. The first half of the Wyoming sessions in 2018 were spent writing and recording an album that was never released. Love Everyone was the planned name for the album that would eventually become Ye, but for a while was a project that was less subtle and more blatantly offensive than anything else Kanye would have made. The singles Lift Yourself and Ye vs. the People, the latter of which we already covered, were released when Love Everyone was the planned album. Lift Yourself is a very tongue-in-cheek diss track towards Drake, addressing the beef that they had at the time about a stolen flow and a stolen instrumental. But the rest of the leaked tracks on that album are now famous unreleased songs for just how over-the-top offensive they were. Namely, a song that was going to be titled DJ Khaled's Son, in which Kanye threw slurs at gay people and said other hateful things about women, Hispanic people, and trans people, as well as other groups. Other songs included lyrics supporting Donald Trump, denouncing the Me Too movement, and lyrics about rape. I should note that there is debate about how offensive this album was going to be, or if it was going to be offensive at all, but if you ask me, Kanye still had intentions of saying the most outrageous things possible to further whatever agenda he had. The obvious ocean of backlash that Kanye received after this interview led him to cancel Love Everyone and rework it into the album that would end up getting released, Ye. And just for good measure, at the end of 2018, Kanye ran up on stage at the end of his SNL appearance to deliver an off-script political rant. He never got invited back, received backlash from the public, and so on. What the fuck is happening? But that era had to eventually end. Like a toddler ditching a toy a week after Christmas, Kanye decided that he was done with politics in April of 2018, merely a few months after he boldly pledged his allegiance. In place of politics, Kanye said that he was focusing his energy back into making music and to Christianity. I mean, to be fair, being a devout Christian does at least align with his unwarranted hatred towards certain groups of people, so at least he's consistent. This manifested in the creation of the new group and touring event, the Sunday Service Choir. Weekly, they would hold shows directed by Kanye, who had just changed his stage name to just Ye, by the way, to perform a variety of songs. The events quickly became somewhat of a phenomenon, especially after Coachella 2019, where Ye used the Sunday service performance to tease some of the tracks off of his upcoming album, Jesus is King. But, unfortunately, this album did even worse than Ye, his previous album, both commercially and critically. It did actually break a record. It was the first album to be at the very top of the Billboard rap, R&B, gospel, and Christian charts all at the same time, but reviews from critics were mixed, and the initial streaming numbers were not what they were on his previous albums. The main issue with this album, to put it bluntly, is that it suffers from a lot of the same issues as his previous few albums, because they're all made by the same guy, who is, by almost every definition, losing his mind. In fact, a lot of these songs were initially written in 2018 2016 when he was working on the album Yandhi, which was done but never released for seemingly no reason at all. So a lot of this album, which is intentionally supposed to be very different from his previous albums, was made in the same headspace as Ye, and that results in this album having incredibly contradictory and self-indulgent themes. Upon release, the album was immediately criticized for being a confusing mess of, at times, committed Christian lyrics, and also the same type of uncomfortable narcissistic lyrics that we saw in previous years. Selah has religious lyrics right next to lyrics about lean. Closed on Sunday has the famously corny chorus, "Closed on Sunday, you my Chick-fil-A." And Hands On seems weirdly rude towards the very group that he's trying to fit in with. We're very much looking at the creative decline of Kanye West. Beyond just opinions of an album, this is much less inspired and much more of the same stuff Kanye had already been making for a few years. No more stories, no new topics, and instrumentally, it sounds unfinished, rushed at best, and weirdly boring for an artist who used to always push the envelope of sound in hip-hop. Post-Ye, Kanye was much more transparent about his mental illness, or his perceived lack thereof, I should say. He proudly stated that he did not take the medication that was prescribed by the doctors who diagnosed him with bipolar disorder. And I'm not here to judge someone or give my take on someone's medical situation, but it is clear that the people in his life are doing him a disservice by not stepping in to help offset the severity of whatever symptoms he's clearly facing. Speaking for this 2019 era, he seemed frustrated about the state of his mental illness. He would routinely post on social media and rant in interviews about his audience and the wider public's perspective of him. He was also known for assaulting paparazzi, making rash business decisions that might harm himself or his loved ones financially, saying hurtful things, and other directly harmful behavior. It just kind of surprises me that nothing was done at this time. This is where many start to seriously question, is there anyone telling Kanye no? I mean, rushed and unfinished were two words that no one expected to be associated with a Kanye West album. The artist who reworked Late Registration in its final phases. The artist who was known for nitpicking concert stages for not looking creative enough. The artist who ranted to Quentin Tarantino, famous Hollywood producer, about a music video idea. The devotion to making impactful art seems to have been replaced by a fervor for demanding that people listen to Kanye's, frankly, crazy ideas. And things don't get much better over the next few years. 2020 was the first time that Kanye West ran for president. His party association was the birthday party, and his reasoning for that was because when he wins, it would be everyone's birthday. Despite the fact that almost everyone thought it was a publicity stunt, he did provide real ideas of what he would do. Most of it aligned with bringing Christianity back into the country. He was also very anti-abortion and admitted that this would probably affect his marriage. And by late November of 2020, he did resign from his running campaign. In 2021, Ye said that he was done releasing music until his deals at Universal and Sony were over, which is fair enough. I mean, we all know how evil record labels can be. But in the summer of 2021, Donda, an album named after his late mother, was released. Ye said that allegedly it was released without his approval and that Universal altered the track list. The album also had DaBaby and Marilyn Manson on it, two figures that are highly controversial, which didn't necessarily help the album or Kanye's reputation. In 2022, Donda 2 was released, but exclusively on Kanye's very own Bluetooth speaker called the Stem Player. It only just now got released on streaming platforms in June of 2025, this year. And this was the first album that almost everyone, critics and the general public, disliked. First and foremost because of the exclusivity, but also because it was even more unfinished, bizarre, and unrelatable. And only a few weeks after Donda 2's release, we reach an impasse with this video. Not only did Ye and Kim K's divorce get finalized and he lost custody of his children, but something else happened that we're gonna have to talk about. On October 7th of 2022, the entire world woke up pissed off at Kanye West. He had made an Instagram post depicting a text conversation between him and Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy, where Ye suggests that Combs is being, quote, controlled by Jewish people. Once again, most people assumed it was a publicity stunt, because up until this point, it was assumed that all of Kanye's bizarre actions were to promote his music or promote his businesses. This isn't me rationalizing his actions to any degree, and I'm not going to do that for the rest of this video, but I do think it's important to note that this didn't have the same effect as if someone like Barack Obama said something similar. Once again, it's like the old grandparent at a family dinner. He just didn't have a filter on Twitter and most people accepted it. But where it seriously started to shock everyone was in the coming days. The next day, he posted the infamous Twitter post that I'm not going to be reading out loud, but you can read yourself. He subsequently did an entire media tour where he would double down on these statements and go way further down the anti-Semitic rabbit hole. And from there, things start to seriously crash down. An unreleased segment of Tucker Carlson and Ye gets leaked where Kanye is spouting the same type of rhetoric with added notes of racism. He loses his deals with Adidas and Apple for his clothing line and his music drops. He denounces his bipolar diagnosis entirely because he was diagnosed by a Jewish doctor, and he continues to say incredibly cryptic but hateful stuff on Twitter the entire time, all the while losing every single business and financial connection that he had made over the last 2 years. His music has also been in line with this incredibly offensive agenda over the last 3 years as well. There was the very blatant song that had the Heil Hitler chorus. There were also album covers made by known neo-Nazis or depicting Nazi symbolism. And throughout the numerous music releases that he's had since this controversy, he manages to constantly remind the audience of his views and or argue with the audience about whether or not he should be remorseful. We are so unbelievably far from any amount of the nuance I talked about with albums like 808s and Heartbreak or My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. There are no deeper meanings, subliminal morals, or stories to tell. Listen, you know it's bad when Ty Dolla $ign is the saving grace on a Kanye album. There are many songs on Vultures 1 and 2 that audiences universally agree are ruined by Kanye. Kanye wants to say things that he perceives he's not allowed to say, almost in childish defiance towards the people who are telling him he's not allowed to say them, to test the limits of fame and show people that he is willing to go to great lengths to be listened to and respected as a visionary or whatever label he wants to have. One day, he'll apologize for everything. The next, he's back to tweeting obscenities. He'll be into anti-Semitism for a few weeks, and then he'll get a little racist for a bit. All the while convincing himself and everyone around him that he knows what he's doing and it's all part of some master creative scheme. It's become very hard to differentiate between his actions that are likely motivated by Kanye's delusional creative side and his actions that are influenced by his drug problem and mental struggles. We know his dentist was supplying him with the highly dangerous and mentally taxing substance nitrous oxide. Did that same dentist give him these permanent grills? Was he off his meds or high as hell when he wrote like a dozen tweets defending P. Diddy? And I'll go ahead and speak for a lot of people when I say that that attitude is unlikable and is drawing a lot of us away from Kanye West as a person. But here's the question: should that attitude draw us away from Kanye West's music, new or old? Essentially, what is the moral of this story I've been telling? The most common way this question is phrased is, can you separate the art from the artist? As in, is it possible for anyone to separate the two? From a personal standpoint, yes, of course it is possible. Just ignore all the controversial things Kanye has done. Individually, you could just only listen to the songs that don't contain bizarre lyrics or any lyrics from Kanye at all. Or you could just happen to be someone who doesn't care about or pay attention to lyrics. I have a feeling that most people who are still streaming his music in high quantities would label themselves as that kind of person. So if you want an answer to the question, is it possible to separate the two? It's easy. Yeah, of course you can, with the right amount of willful ignorance. But if we were to ask the question, should we separate the art from the artist, which I think is the question that most people intend to ask when this conversation gets brought up, then the answer is much different. First of all, I want to make something very clear. The narrative that I just drew up of Kanye West's career was a synopsis. There were incredibly impactful events that I left out because, well, I'm not the best writer. But also, this video would have been 4 hours long if I spent time talking about every single controversy that has led people to ask this question about Kanye. Around the same time he was making anti-Semitic comments in 2022, he was seen wearing a White Lives Matter t-shirt in a music video. In 2018, he originally wanted to name his album Ye just Hitler. And well before that, he was known for criticizing the 13th Amendment, the one that abolished slavery, for loopholes that he perceived it had, but made sure to do so in a way that offended as many people as possible, doubling down on his, and I really hate repeating this, so please don't clip this, slavery was a choice comments. He spoke out against the COVID vaccine in 2020 and 2021, yet simultaneously said he was not educated enough to speak on the Israel-Palestine conflict in 2023. And all the way back in 2015, there was was a leak that said an original version of the song Famous off the life of Pablo had anti-Semitic lyrics in it. And if you think I'm bringing all of this up just to discredit his success and attack his character, you are wrong. I bring this up for two reasons. First of all, it shows that Kanye West has had some of these views for a very long time. Second of all, I bring all of this up to address a certain comment that I hear often. It's been made more than clear that Kanye wants to include his offensive views front and center in his recent music, but I hear a lot of people draw a red line in his discography. Oh, but before insert album name, he was just an unhinged artist. Nowadays is when he has gone too far. But after everything we've heard, that is just clearly not the case. Remember when he defended Bill Cosby in 2016 and everyone thought it was a publicity stunt to promote the life of Pablo? Yeah, well, on facts, he doubles down on those statements. We already talked about him poking the bear on Jesus is King, especially on Hands On with his comments about the 13th Amendment. Shit, dude, on Graduation, the album from the famous meme, This Guy Made Graduation, there is a line on Flashing Lights that is creepily anti-Semitic. Re-listening to all of Kanye's music really made me realize there's no way I can't think of who this guy is throughout any individual album. It's hard to go 2 songs without being reminded of some awful, cringeworthy thing he's said or done. But what would be even worse is if, instead of cringing at these things, I actually listened to him and let him persuade me. But the alarming thing is that that has happened, and still happens all the time. I bet almost everyone watching right now knows someone who started repeating really questionable stuff around the same time they started defending Kanye West. But what is definitely worse than my personal anecdote was in October of 2022 when neo-Nazi group the Goyim Defense League protested in Los Angeles by hanging a banner off of a bridge that said Kanye is right about the Jews on it. And this has been replicated across the country as well. So because of the direct harm that he has caused, logically, Kanye should face consequences. But let's say we ignore, even though we definitely shouldn't, but let's just say that we ignore all the actual harm that he has done. Art itself is different based on the person that it comes from. Once you know it, it's really hard to just ignore the context of any piece of art. It's the same reason that spoilers are so annoying for movies and TV. It takes real effort to just pretend that you don't know the context behind all of the events that are happening leading up to whatever ending you got spoiled for you. In the same way that you can have a movie ruined for you by learning context about the events that happen in the movie, if you had context about the person who made the movie and they happened to be a piece of shit, it would ruin the movie for you equally. Everyone loves to make fun of those right-wing movies that are pushing some agenda, and it's the same thing. Anyone telling you that knowing what they know about Kanye West doesn't affect their experience listening to his music is either lying to you, agrees with the things that he says, or somehow doesn't know the things that he has said or done and can't pick up on them from his lyrics. So what am I proposing that we do about this? Well, honestly, I'm not smart enough to think of some umbrella solution to this massive moral and ethical debate. At the end of the day, this situation is a question of the extent of free speech, the mental health systems that we have in our country, and how we treat famous people, things that are far too big for this YouTube video to cover. But what I do want to give my opinion about is the conversation here about art and creativity. This is a point that I've made on this channel before, but I'll say it again. If you are someone with an audience that is influenced by you and uses you and your art as part of their identity, you are responsible for the actions of your audience when they are influenced by you. Kanye West has neglected this responsibility, and his legacy should take the appropriate hit. I'll say this, if someone got their platform by making genuinely compelling art, I don't think they should be stopped from making art or silenced from talking to their audience just because the majority of people dislike them. Now, to be clear, what Kanye has done is well above just a lot of people disliking him, and he should probably face some real consequences, but drawing that line and knowing how to deal with that is above my pay grade. So anyway, above that aforementioned belief, I believe it's dangerous to put someone like Kanye up on a pedestal in a glass box just pretending they can't do anything wrong because they've made compelling art. In the same way that we cherish certain artists for their positive actions, we shouldn't be afraid to knock Kanye off the GOAT pillar because of his inherently negative actions. To personally still enjoy his music is one thing, but to publicly co-sign his legacy as something to be admired and hold him up on that pedestal as some sort of misunderstood genius is a whole other thing. As consumers of art, we should have much more integrity than that. There have been artists in the past, and there will be artists in the future who reached the creative heights of Kanye West, and can do so, and have done so, without affecting so many other people negatively. When I said most famous people are crazy in the intro of this video, I did not mean the type of crazy that affects the livelihood of many marginalized groups of people. I have personally always been fascinated by situations where the rules of creativity get tested. That is where the majority of my expertise and my passion for this discussion comes from. I don't want anyone to take this video as some sort of political indictment or an opinion piece about the things that Kanye has said. But I hope the thing that we can all take away from this video is the extreme impact that Kanye West's career will have on the idea of art and creativity. In my opinion, I think it affirms that art will never truly be separated from the person who made it, no matter who it is or what they made.